When should you give up on a project? Now, generally, my advice for comics and creative work is never give up, because I think if you're like me, you already give yourself tons of excuses, like not to succeed at your work. I think being an artist, you deal with a lot of self-doubt and struggling with how to tell your story the best way and not having enough time to work on your comic. It can be really tough, and a lot of the times you'll want to give up. So normally, my advice is to keep going, stay determined. It'll be worth it in the end. But sometimes there will be projects that you need to say goodbye to. There are a few reasons for why you should give up a project, and most of them have to do with self-care. So I'll go over how to know when you should give up on your project, because it can be difficult to parse through. So number one, when your comic makes you absolutely miserable and you've tried over and over and over again to fix it and nothing's working and the story doesn't make sense, it's full of plot holes, your art's not good enough to do this story justice. It's just not working, and no matter what you do, you can't force yourself to keep going with it. And it's causing you distress. That's a good sign that it's time to try something else. To drop the project, put it away for a while. Because chances are the reason it's not working might be because your abilities aren't up to where you want them to be, or the story needs to be torn apart and reworked, and you need some time away from it to be able to do that. It's kind of like when you know that expression, you can't see the forest through the trees. It's when you're just too close to a project, you can't really see the whole picture and make it work, because you're so in it and focused on all the little details. So yeah, when you've gotten to that point, it might be time to take a break. Another sign that you might need to drop a project is when you have an abusive relationship with your comic where it hates you and you hate it, and you drop the project crying and swearing you'll never work on it again, and then a month later you're back at it and you hate it and you can't stop, and when it causes you just emotional distress to work on it, but you're also obsessed, that can mean it's time to stop. Or if you're so emotionally invested in the comic, when you're so emotionally invested in your comic that it just exhausts you to work on it, or it's just when it torments you, or the subject matter is too heavy right now or too fresh. Say, because you could be making a comic that's you're drawing on a traumatic experience or something where it can really mess with you. That could be a reason to put the project down and come back at a later time when the emotions aren't so raw, or you feel you're a little less emotionally connected with it. I mean, you should be passionate about your projects and connected with them emotionally, but not to the point where it's distressing. And finally, another good red flag that maybe you need to drop a project is if it's your magnum opus that you've been dreaming about since you were 12, or a project, not just it's a project that you have a lot of perfectionism attached to it. So, it's a book you've been working on for 10 years of your life, and it just doesn't work. The story's broken because you've rewritten it a whole bunch of times, or it has a bunch of carryovers from when you were 12 and you thought, this thing was cool, but it doesn't actually make sense because you were 12, or you've decided to add in all this extra work by putting in 10 million set pieces, and it's more work to fix it than it's worth, and it's not working. That is definitely a good sign to put down the project. In that case, it's good to maybe go choose smaller projects, especially if this is, say, your first comic, and it's one you've been dreaming about since you were young. Maybe it's good to put it down, go work on a smaller project or something you're not as emotionally invested in, so you can build up your skills, you can learn how to write comics or draw comics better, because when you're so into a project where it has to be perfect and it has to fit your vision, that can be super stressful, and you can hurt yourself and hurt the quality of the comic doing that. Because like I said before, you want to be passionate about your comics, but you don't want it to be at your own expense. You don't want to be so passionate about it that it hurts a ton if it doesn't work out. And if you've tied your self-worth to your comic or your work, it's definitely a good idea to put the project aside and work through that, because that is not a healthy way to go into your projects. All this to say, even if you drop a project, that doesn't mean you can never come back to it. It's a good idea to, if these projects are giving you so much distress that it's interfering with your life, it's a good idea to put them down and maybe come back in a year or two. Work on some smaller comics, work on some fun, fluffy things, maybe. They don't have to be fluffy, but definitely work on stuff that doesn't tax you emotionally for a little bit. You know, you can build up your skills in comics, you can go explore other mediums and other stories, but if you put the project down and you leave it for a little bit, when you come back to it, you'll have a better mindset to like tear apart a story that isn't working, put it back together in a better way, or cannibalize great ideas from your dream comic and turn them into something that like isn't full of plot holes. Bones went through that. He wrote a novel that he'd been dreaming of since he was like a teenager, and after putting it down for a long time, he picked it back up and basically tore it to shreds and put it back together in a way that turned out really amazing. But yeah, a break can really help you make the project better. It can be better for you, and it can be better for the project. Though you may find sometimes that you'll drop a project and you just don't want to touch it ever again. And that's okay. You can have trunk comics that just sit in a little box in your room that you never touch again. That's totally fine. They're a learning experience. You'll do better next time. So yeah, do your best. Keep working at your stuff. But if it's hurting you, take a break. And that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions or if you'd like to request a video topic, please leave a comment down below. See you guys next time. Goodbye!